Nolan Arbaugh's life changed in a fraction of a second in June 2016. He was a 22-year-old student, working at a kids' summer camp in upstate New York, when he went swimming in a lake. He can't tell me exactly what happened, but thinks one of his friends must have accidentally struck him very hard in the side of his head as they ran into the water and plunged beneath the surface. When he woke up face down in the water, unable to move or breathe, Nolan immediately knew he was paralyzed. But he didn't panic. He felt no fear at all, he says. You never know what you're going to do in those high-stress situations. I found out that day that it's hard to shake me. I am very, very calm under pressure. Elon Musk would ultimately turn this quality to his advantage when, after nearly 8 years of being quadriplegic, Nolan agreed to allow the world's richest man to implant an electronic chip into his brain. In January 2024, Nolan became the first human recipient of a brain-computer interface BCI developed by Musk's company, Neuralink. If it worked, it would allow him to control a computer using only the power of his mind. Only 4 months after he first heard about Neuralink, Nolan was on an operating table, with a purpose-built robot poised to insert the M1 chip into his motor cortex. The stakes could not have been higher for him. He was risking infection, hemorrhage, and brain damage. My brain is the last part of myself that I really feel I have control over, he tells me from his wheelchair at his kitchen table in Yuma, Arizona. But the stakes for humankind, too, were very great. If Neuralink succeeds, the world's most powerful billionaire will have fulfilled his science fiction-fueled dreams of melding minds with machines. What kind of person chooses to be Elon Musk's guinea pig? And, once the experiment is over, what happens next, for Nolan, and for the rest of us? Nolan's world is in a different universe to Musk's. Now 30. He lives in the same simple, single-story house in the dusty military town in the Sonoran Desert where he grew up. He left for an international studies degree at Texas A&M University, only to move back after his accident, so that his mother, Mia, stepfather and half-brother could take care of him. The words "be grateful for small things, big things and everything in between" are stenciled on the kitchen wall. Goats, chickens and a plump turkey named Hope roam the backyard. To golden retrievers and an enormous golden doodle pad around the kitchen, occasionally pushing their noses into my lap. Nolan has an electric wheelchair that he can operate using a mouthpiece. His forearms lie still on the brightly upholstered armrests. Every so often, Mia reaches forward to uncurl his fingers, or offer him a sip of coffee from a straw in a big gulp cup, or swat away the flies that buzz around his face in the merciless Arizona heat. He asks her to roll up his shirt to show me a sleeve of tattoos on his arm. I got it done after my accident because it didn't hurt, he grins. The bracelets are inked onto his wrist. A permanent rendering of ones given to him by the girls who pulled him out of the water in 2016. Before his accident, Nolan was outdoorsy and athletic, playing football, American football, basketball, rugby and golf. He liked to go hunting and shooting deer with his family. He was musical, too, playing bass in a rock band, and he performed in high school theater productions. He loved Xbox and PlayStation, but was never really into tech. A shelf next to us is still crammed with the board games he used to play, Settlers of Catan, The Game of Life. Mia worked at their church, and Nolan was a student leader there. His faith was a huge part of his life, growing up. I always wanted to make it through college as a Christian, he says. That lasted about a week. I was sleeping around, I was doing drugs, I was drinking a lot. He sees his accident as divine intervention. It was God pulling me back. I really do think that it was the best thing that could have happened to me. The blow to Nolan's head didn't break his neck. It dislocated it, and his vertebra went back into place immediately, but it left his spinal cord severely damaged. The higher up a serious spinal cord injury is, the more extensive the paralysis. Superman actor Christopher Reeve shattered his first and second vertebra, and could not hold up his head without assistance. Nolan's injury was around his fourth and fifth vertebrae, so he can move his head and shoulders, and express himself with nods and shrugs, which he often does. He uses the word luck a lot. I was really lucky that I wasn't ventilated for my entire life, he says. I was really lucky that I didn't have a traumatic brain injury. At first, there were a lot of promising signs that his condition might improve, but he ultimately never recovered much movement. At the beginning of his adult life, he was facing a lifetime of dependency. I have to rely on my family for everything, to give me a shower, to help with bowel movements and urination. Nolan was a smoker, and if he wanted a cigarette, he would have to ask someone to take him outside, put one in his mouth, light it and get rid of the ash for him. He liked to smoke weed, too. It's legal in Arizona. I didn't like him smoking. But he's an adult. It was hard, Mia tells me. She looks over to him. I'm your mom. Of course, I'm going to give my 2 cents. I'm a grown man, Nolan says, to have to rely on other people to do it. It really sucked. He reluctantly gave up a couple of years ago, unable to bear the guilt of exposing his carers to second-hand smoke. Another thing people take for granted, just being able to text someone privately, is not easy as a quadriplegic. If I want to dictate something, it's like yelling out to the world what I'm saying. I love you, shouts Mia. I just didn't have a way to build my life privately. It's extraordinary, but also totally unremarkable. Nolan is using a computer like anyone else. He's just not moving his body. I forget how impressive it is, because it's so natural to me. There was an iPad Nolan could use. I'd have a stick that I would hold in my mouth, with a little piece of conductive fabric on the end of it, and I would touch my iPad and use it in that way. I did that for years, but it was frustrating. He had to be put into the right position by other people. Texting with the mouse stick was very slow, and if Nolan wanted to use dictation, he had to speak with the stick in his mouth. If it fell out, he'd have to call for help. It's not very easy. And then, there wasn't a whole lot I could do on it. I mean, it's an iPad. You can't do all the same things you can do on a computer. He asks Mia to open his laptop in front of him on the kitchen table. He turns towards the screen. Implant connect, he says, and he begins to play chess, moving pieces across the board with swift, deft cursor movements, while his hands remain motionless on the armrests of his wheelchair. He's been playing against some of the Neuralink engineers for a few months, he tells me as he takes someone's pawn. None of them are very good, so it's not so hard. Next, he's browsing the internet, opening X, checking his DMs, composing a message by directing his cursor across a virtual keyboard. Now he's slaying baddies, darting back and forth with a Reaper's Scythe in a game called Vampire Survivors. I love this game, he says, looking over to me while keeping control of the cursor. He completes a level and digital confetti rains down the screen. It's extraordinary, but also totally unremarkable. Nolan is using a computer like anyone else does. He's just not moving his body at all. Sometimes I forget how impressive it is, because it's so natural to me, he says, shrugging again. In some respects, Nolan is better at using a computer than the rest of us. When he first received the Neuralink implant, he tells me, all he wanted to do was play video games. He challenged his friends to a multiplayer version of Civilization VI, called Red Death. It is absolutely a game of speed, a test of speed, whoever's quickest to the draw wins. And I was beating them. His eyes are wide, it blew my mind. Just that one little taste made me realize that this technology is going to change the world. There's nothing new about BCEs. The first experiments involving chips and animal brains began in the late 1960s, the gold standard in human BCI design. The Utor array, a square matrix of needles inserted 1.5 millimeters into the brain, was developed in 1992, 2 decades before Nolan's surgery. In 2004, a quadriplegic man called Matthew Nagel became the first person to have a chip implanted inside his skull. While no regulator has yet allowed BCEs to be used outside an experimental setting, enough people have them for an online forum, BCI Pioneers, to exist for the community.